I remember meeting a young entrepreneur in Berlin a few years ago. She had just launched her third startup, two had already failed. As we sat across from each other in a coffee shop that smelled like fresh ambition and espresso, she told me something that stuck with me. She said, "I keep building because I believe in the kind of world I want to help create. And that's the difference. Success isn't always measured by the profits we stack or the accolades we gather. Real success, the kind that endures, the kind that shapes lives and legacies, comes from something deeper. It comes from an alignment with who we are, what we believe, and how we show up in the world. And yet, we live in a world that praises the outcome more than the origin. We talk about the millions made, the companies built, the followers gained, but we rarely pause to ask, why did it matter? What was the point of it all? That's where it starts. If we want to understand success, not the fleeting kind, but the kind that transforms, we have to begin not with what we want to achieve, but with why we want to achieve it, the reason behind the result, the purpose behind the performance. I've spoken with leaders who ran global corporations and those who were just starting a side hustle. And whether it was a CEO of a Fortune 100 or a student with a dream, the pattern was always the same. The ones who made something truly meaningful had something unshakable beneath the surface. They were clear not just on what they were doing, but why they were doing it. And that brings me to the first principle, clarity of purpose. It's not the most talented who rise. It's not even the most resourced. It's the ones who are anchored in something bigger than themselves. Clarity of purpose isn't just about writing a mission statement. It's about living it. It's about waking up and knowing that everything you do is in service of a cause greater than your comfort. I remember working with a nonprofit founder in Nairobi. He wasn't the most experienced leader. He didn't have a fancy MBA or a powerful network, but his organization was growing faster than any I'd seen in that space. When I asked him what drove him, he said, "I want to give kids the kind of childhood I never had." That was it. Simple, clear, deep, and everything. Every decision, every hire, every strategy was filtered through that lens. That's the kind of clarity that changes things, but purpose alone isn't enough. Purpose is the compass. But you still have to move, and movement requires a second principle, courage to act. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to move forward despite it. Too often, we wait for confidence. We wait until we feel ready, but success doesn't belong to the ready, it belongs to the brave. The most successful people I've met didn't always know what they were doing. In fact, many of them admitted they were winging it half the time. But they acted anyway, they leaned into the unknown, they chose movement over mastery, and in that choice they discovered growth. I once spoke to a leader who left a high-paying job in finance to start a small bakery. When I asked him why, he said, "Because I woke up one day and realized I was rich in money but poor in meaning." That decision terrified him, but he said something I'll never forget. "Fear will always be a passenger. I just stopped letting it drive." Courage doesn't mean reckless. It means responsible risk. It means stepping out before the path is fully lit, trusting that the act of walking will illuminate the way. And it's when we act with courage that the third principle begins to take shape. Discipline of consistency. People often confuse discipline with rigidity, but real discipline isn't about control. It's about commitment. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up over and over again, especially when it's boring. Especially when it's hard. I knew a violinist who practiced at the same time every morning 5:30 a.m. For 20 years, she said, "You don't get good by feeling inspired. You get good by being consistent." And that's true for anything. Whether it's building a business, raising a family, learning a skill, it's not what you do once that shapes your life. It's what you do repeatedly. Success isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. It happens in the reps, in the quiet hours, in the unnoticed moments where you choose to keep going. And that discipline over time becomes a superpower. It compounds, but here's where it gets interesting. You can have purpose, you can act with courage, you can show up consistently, and still feel stuck. Still feel empty, and that's because we're not machines, we're human. Which brings us to the fourth principle, the humility to learn. There's a dangerous myth that once you've made it, you've figured it out. But the most extraordinary people I know are always learning, always questioning, always open. I met a billionaire once who took notes while I spoke. I was stunned. I said, "You've built empires. Why are you taking notes?" He smiled and said, "Because the day I stop learning is the day I start declining." That humility wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. The world is changing too fast to pretend we know it all, and the most successful people are the ones who are students before they are teachers, who listen more than they speak, who hire people smarter than them, who are willing to unlearn as much as they're willing to learn. There's strength in saying, "I don't know," because that opens the door to possibility. Arrogance shuts it, humility opens it wide. Most people think success begins with ambition. They think it begins with setting goals, chasing outcomes, getting more done in less time. But if you've ever reached a goal and still felt empty, you know that ambition alone isn't enough. There's something deeper, something more foundational. The people who create the most lasting, fulfilling success all start from the same place. They have clarity of purpose. Clarity of purpose means knowing why you're doing what you're doing before you even begin. It's not about the job title, the salary, the recognition. It's about the belief that drives the action, the cause behind the goal, the reason you get out of bed in the morning even when it's hard, even when nobody's watching, even when you're failing. That kind of clarity doesn't just keep you going. It makes sure you're going in the right direction. There's a story I once heard about a bricklayer. When someone asked him what he was doing, he said, "I'm laying bricks." They asked a second man doing the same work, and he said, "I'm building a wall." But the third man smiled and said, "I'm building a cathedral." They were all doing the same job, but only one of them had clarity of purpose. And because of that, only one of them felt a deeper sense of meaning in the work. When you have clarity of purpose, your work stops being a task and becomes a contribution. You're not just checking boxes or climbing ladders. You're living out something you believe in. That's why purpose beats passion. Passion fades when things get hard. Purpose sticks. Passion wants excitement. Purpose is willing to endure. Passion is about you. Purpose is about what you serve. Clarity doesn't mean you have every answer. It just means you know what question you're trying to solve. And it means you're willing to keep asking that question, refining it, returning to it, every time you face a crossroads. People who succeed with purpose don't have fewer obstacles. They just know which ones are worth pushing through. It's easy to lose clarity in a noisy world. We're constantly being told what success should look like. More money, bigger titles, more visibility, more followers. But when you chase someone else's definition of success, even if you reach it, it won't fulfill you. You'll always be wondering what's missing. And what's missing is you, your voice, your cause, your reason. I've seen people with every external marker of success, wealth, prestige, influence, break down because they never knew why they were doing it. They had the results, but not the roots, and when the applause faded, so did their motivation. But I've also seen people with far fewer resources live lives of profound impact and deep fulfillment because they were grounded in purpose. Clarity of purpose is not found in a moment. It's something you uncover over time. It comes from paying attention to the moments that move you, the problems that break your heart, the values you're unwilling to compromise. It comes from listening more closely to your own beliefs than the expectations of others. And once you have that clarity, everything changes. Decisions become easier. Priorities become clearer. You stop saying yes to things that don't matter. You stop wasting energy on things that don't align. Purpose also gives you resilience when things go wrong. And they will. It's your reason that gets you back up. Purpose is stronger than fear, more durable than failure. It gives pain meaning. It turns setbacks into learning. Without purpose, failure is defeat. With purpose, failure is simply a step in the process. Courage is often misunderstood. People think it's the absence of fear, the ability to stride forward without hesitation. But real courage doesn't mean being fearless. It means moving forward despite the fear. It means acknowledging that fear is present, that doubts will arise, but deciding that your purpose is bigger than your hesitation. Courage is not about pretending you're not afraid. It's about moving through your fear because you know what you're doing matters. When you set out on any journey, whether it's personal or professional, fear is always going to be there. It's a natural response to the unknown, the uncertain. But fear, when faced with courage, doesn't paralyze you. It sharpens you. It challenges you to grow, to stretch, to evolve. The more you face your fears, the more you expand your capacity to handle whatever comes your way. The people who do extraordinary things aren't the ones without fear. They're the ones who choose to take action anyway. One of the most powerful things courage does is that it silences the voice of self-doubt. When you start, there's always that voice in your head that tells you you're not ready, you're not good enough, you'll fail. But courage says, I'm going to start anyway. And every time you take a step forward, that voice weakens. Each action you take, however small, builds momentum, and momentum eventually turns into confidence. But it starts with a choice, the choice to act in the face of fear. I remember meeting a woman who had been in a corporate job for over 15 years. She had reached the peak of her career in her company, but she was miserable. She wanted to leave, wanted to start her own business, but the fear of failure, of losing financial security, of what people would think, those fears paralyzed her. For years she stayed in a job she hated, simply because it was familiar, because it was safe. But one day something clicked. She realized that living in fear was worse than trying and failing. She quit her job and launched her own business. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and there were times when she wanted to quit, but she didn't. She kept moving forward even when it was hard. The courage to act, to leap into the unknown, is what eventually gave her the success she had been seeking. Courage isn't just about the big, dramatic leaps. Sometimes it's the small acts of bravery that lead to the greatest growth. Courage to have the tough conversations. Courage to speak up when you feel you don't belong. Courage to ask for help when you need it. Courage to keep going when no one is watching, when no one is applauding. Those are the moments that build character, that build success. Because success isn't just about the outcome, it's about the integrity of the process. The courage to show up day after day, when you're unsure of the results but certain of the mission, is what separates those who make an impact from those who simply go through the motions. But courage isn't a solitary act. It's contagious. When you act courageously, you inspire others to do the same. Think about the people who have influenced you the most in your life. What stands out about them isn't just their achievements. It's their ability to take risks, to step into uncomfortable spaces, to be vulnerable and real. They make the hard choices, the brave ones, the ones that force them to grow. And because they do, they create an environment where others feel safe enough to do the same. The beauty of courage is that it doesn't require perfection. You don't have to have it all figured out before you start. You don't have to have all the answers. In fact, you'll never have all the answers. But the act of moving, of starting, of stepping into the unknown, despite your fears, that's where growth happens, and that growth compounds. It builds. The more you act with courage, the more courageous you become. Courage also teaches you to embrace failure as part of the journey. So many people are afraid to fail, but it's through failure that we learn, adapt, and build resilience. The person who avoids failure avoids growth. The person who embraces failure understands that it's not the end, it's just feedback. They know that every setback is a setup for something greater, and that's what courage does. It allows you to fail without letting it define you. It lets you take risks without fearing the consequences, because you know failure isn't a reflection of who you are, but a step towards who you're becoming. The people who achieve extraordinary things are not the ones who avoid fear. They are the ones who decide to take action despite it. They understand that fear doesn't have to control them. Instead, it can be a signal that they are on the right path, that they're about to push their boundaries, that they are on the verge of something new. And it's that courage to act, that willingness to step forward even when it feels impossible, that leads to breakthroughs, to transformation, to success. Discipline is often misunderstood. People often think of it as rigid adherence to rules or monotonous routines, something that requires constant effort and feels draining. But real discipline is not about restriction. It's about freedom. It's about choosing to do what matters, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it. It's the ability to stay committed to a goal, to show up consistently, to make decisions today that your future self will thank you for. The truth is, success is not a result of isolated bursts of effort or moments of brilliance. It's built through the day-to-day, the small, often unnoticed choices you make each day. It's not about waiting for motivation to strike. It's about making a decision to stick with the process, even when the initial excitement fades and the rewards aren't immediately clear. When you look at any person who has achieved significant success, whether in business, sports, or the arts, you don't just see talent or luck. You see a commitment to showing up consistently. You see someone who practices relentlessly, who keeps refining their craft, who keeps pushing, even when progress seems slow. Consistency is what separates those who achieve their goals from those who give up halfway. It's the difference between starting a journey and completing it. There's a reason why habits, not grand gestures, shape our lives. People who succeed do not wake up every morning inspired to conquer the world. They wake up and do the work. They show up for the process, not for the applause or the rewards. When you're disciplined, you're not waiting for the perfect moment. You create the moment. It's not about waiting for inspiration to come to you. It's about creating the environment where inspiration has room to thrive. Discipline is also about having the self-awareness to know that success rarely comes quickly. Overnight success is a myth. It takes time, energy, and above all, perseverance. People who achieve great things know that they'll face setbacks, frustration, and failure. But their discipline keeps them moving forward, even when things don't go according to plan. They keep showing up day after day, because they know that the small steps they take now will compound over time. This consistency is crucial because it builds momentum. Momentum is a powerful thing. Once you start consistently showing up, you begin to build a rhythm. You get into a flow. It becomes easier to keep going, even when challenges arise. And the more momentum you build, the more the work becomes second nature. What once felt like a struggle becomes a habit, and what was once difficult becomes a part of who you are. There's a story about a man who decided to build a house. The first few days, he put in the hard work, laying the foundation, brick by brick. Progress was slow, and it seemed like the house would never be finished. But he kept going, and over time, the work became easier. The foundation was in place, the walls started to rise, and soon the house began to take shape. In the beginning, it felt like nothing was happening, but the discipline to keep going, to show up every day and do the work, made all the difference. Eventually, the house was built, and it stood strong because of the consistency in the process. Discipline is also about making decisions in advance. The most successful people don't waste time making the same decisions repeatedly. They set routines, establish systems, and commit to their vision. When you make decisions ahead of time, whether it's your daily schedule, your exercise routine, or your work habits, you remove the uncertainty that can lead to procrastination. You stop having to rely on willpower alone, and instead, you create a structure that supports your goals. This level of discipline also involves knowing your limits and managing your energy. It's about pacing yourself, knowing when to push harder and when to pull back. There's a balance between pushing yourself and giving yourself space to recharge. People who are successful in the long run know that it's not about working yourself into the ground. It's about working smart, staying consistent, and allowing yourself time to recover so you can perform at your best. In the workplace, discipline is often what separates the average from the exceptional. It's the ability to show up every day, even when you don't feel like it, and still give your best effort. It's the willingness to push through the inevitable obstacles, to refine your skills, to stay focused on the bigger picture. The person who stays disciplined in their work doesn't get distracted by the noise, doesn't get swayed by setbacks. They keep their eyes on the prize and they take action, even when things aren't going perfectly. At its core, discipline is the ability to align your actions with your long-term vision. It's about choosing what's important over what's easy. It's about staying focused, even when distractions are plentiful. The more disciplined you become, the clearer your path becomes. You stop letting fleeting desires take you off course, and you start prioritizing the things that will lead you to your goals. Discipline also creates a sense of pride. When you commit to the process, when you show up consistently, even when it's tough, you build a deep sense of accomplishment. The satisfaction that comes from knowing you've done your best, that you've honored your commitment to yourself, is more fulfilling than any quick win or shortcut could ever be. It's the pride that comes from the work, from the dedication, from the consistency. Service is often misunderstood as an obligation or a duty, something you do because you have to, because it's expected. But when you approach service with a mindset of contribution and purpose, it transforms not only the lives of others but your own as well. Service is not just about giving. It's about creating value, offering your skills and time to make a difference in someone else's life. And in doing so, finding deeper fulfillment and meaning for yourself. When you think about true success, think about the people whose lives have been impacted by your actions. The most successful people aren't those who have accumulated the most wealth or accolades. They're the ones who have made the greatest impact on others. True success comes when you understand that your greatest purpose is to serve, whether that means serving a cause, a community, or the people around you. It's when you shift from focusing on what you can get to focusing on what you can give. Service doesn't always have to be grand. You don't have to be the CEO of a nonprofit or a world leader to make a difference. The most impactful service is often found in the small, everyday acts. It's in listening to a colleague who's struggling, offering support to a friend, or helping someone solve a problem. It's in the moments when you see a need and decide to do something about it, no matter how small that action might seem. These moments build a culture of service, creating a ripple effect that reaches far beyond the immediate impact. The power of service is in its ability to create connections. When you serve others, you build relationships based on trust, compassion, and respect. These connections are the foundation of not only personal fulfillment, but also professional success. People remember those who helped them when they were in need. They remember the ones who went above and beyond, who didn't hesitate to lend a hand even when it wasn't convenient. Service is the bridge between you and the world around you. It opens doors, fosters collaboration, and cultivates a sense of belonging. Service also cultivates empathy. The more you serve, the more you put yourself in other people's shoes. You begin to understand their struggles, their needs, and their dreams, and when you truly understand someone, you become better equipped to help them. This creates a cycle of giving and receiving where everyone benefits. Empathy isn't just about understanding. It's about acting on that understanding. It's about stepping outside of yourself, putting your ego aside, and offering your time, energy, and resources to improve the lives of others. In the workplace, service can transform the culture. When everyone is focused on serving the team, the organization, or the customer, success becomes a collective effort. You stop thinking of success as a zero-sum game where one person's gain is another's loss. Instead, you start seeing that when one person thrives, the entire group thrives. This mindset of service shifts the focus from individual recognition to collective success. The best leaders are those who serve their teams, who provide the tools and support their people need to succeed. They understand that their role is to help others realize their potential, not to take credit for their achievements. Service also brings a sense of purpose. It reminds you that your work is not just for your own benefit, but for the benefit of others. This sense of purpose is what makes hard work worthwhile. It's the fuel that keeps you going when the work gets tough. When you see the impact you're having on others, it gives your actions meaning. It helps you see that what you do matters beyond the immediate results, that your work is contributing to something bigger than yourself. In the long term, service leads to fulfillment. Success isn't about what you acquire or achieve, it's about the difference you make in the lives of others. When you dedicate yourself to service, you stop measuring success by material wealth or external achievements. Instead, you measure success by the impact you've had, by the relationships you've built, and by the lives you've touched. The more you serve, the more you realize that fulfillment comes not from what you gain, but from what you give. Service also cultivates gratitude. When you focus on others and their needs, you develop a deeper appreciation for what you have. You begin to see how much you've been given and how much you can give in return. Gratitude shifts your perspective. It helps you see the abundance in your life, rather than focusing on what's lacking. It's a mindset that opens doors, creates opportunities, and fosters a sense of peace and contentment. True service is selfless, but it doesn't mean you neglect yourself. The most effective service comes when you are in a position of strength. You need to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. Service requires balance. You give because you have something to give, and you continually replenish your own well.